Hi, I'm Just Can Perspective, and we're back with the first installment of Lessons in Aggression. And the first one I wanted to talk about was territorial aggression. Territorial behavior, completely normal, completely healthy for your dog to do. The most common example that people see of territorial behavior is typically when someone knocks. If a friend comes over and knocks, rings the doorbell, that barking behavior that you see, or like if your dog is in the yard and maybe you happen to be inside or so and someone's walking past the yard, the dog's running up and down the fence barking at them. Those are all very common examples of territorial behavior. But then when we delve into territorial aggression, I've had a few instances of this where the owner thought it was unacceptable, and I explained it to them, and then once they understood it on the dog's level, they completely just shift, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't think of it that way. Again, territorial aggression, very, very normal, healthy in my opinion. It's security. It's what keeps the bad guys away, in my opinion. There's no better security than a dog, because dogs have super hearing and super smells and all that stuff, or the super sense of smell. And I recently had an experience with the dog being territorial, and I've dealt with this before, so I was familiar with handling the situation. So it wasn't a problem. But I was picking the dog up, and I had not met the dog before, at least in that setting. I met the dog here at my facility, and I met the dog several times outside of my facility, and I already knew going into this that I was gonna see territorial behavior. I already knew it, okay? Because I had a mask on, I had never been to the dog's home, never knocked on the door, no familiarity with that at all. I unfortunately forgot my sleeve, my bite sleeve, but sure enough, when I went to open the door, the dog was mouth there right as I cracked it open, and he was barking and snarling, and had his ankles up, his tail was straight up, slow, just kind of wag, telling me hey, this is my property, and you don't want to come in here. Because I know how to handle the situation, I tried to diffuse it by going down to his level, let him smell me, waited a minute or so to see if perhaps, the brain would settle down, but he was definitely more of the, you're not gonna enter, right? So then I had to make my way through, and I eventually was able to de-escalate him, and of course remove him from the home, and then bring him over to my facility, and then he was fine. There was no tension after that. He was completely fine, completely relaxed. And when I explained it to the owners of course they felt bad. I'm like, don't worry about it. I was expecting it. It happens. No, I don't take this personally. Again, even though he'd seen me a few times at my facility, and he had seen me outside of the facility, and he'd never seen me coming into the home. Okay, I'm not the norm in the home context. So he was doing his job. Mom and dad aren't home. So the safety of the home is now in his hands, or his paws, if you want to look at it that way. So that's why I completely expected it, and I should have had my sleeve, but I had left it at my facility because that would have allowed him something to direct to, and then I could have just gone in, no problem. I have another example from a few years ago from a client's dog that I had trained. And this was post the training. This was probably a year, maybe a year and a half later. What happened was, when they had told me initially, they said, Jesse, we're concerned. We just recently had a baby. Our dog just also bit someone last week, and we're concerned that he's going to become aggressive towards the baby. So I said, sorry to hear that. Please give me the details of what happened. It was the day of 4th of July. They were out of town. They were at an Airbnb that was pet friendly. Their dog was not kenneled. Okay, everybody had left. A friend of theirs had gone to their Airbnb to drop off toothpaste or something. And when they entered the home, the dog was underneath the kitchen table, and the person thinking, oh, dog, and started talking or cooing at him. And then he charged from underneath the table and bit the person on the hand and bit them on the thigh. And then that's what led to them reaching out with the concern. As soon as I heard the situation, I was like, okay, that's technically a completely valid bite in the dog world. Okay, so we gotta look at it from the dog's perspective. because the humans are aware of everything that was going on, but the dog is not. The humans were aware that they were out of town staying at an Airbnb that they had paid for, and that they had arranged for a friend to come over at a certain time to drop something off. The dog has no concept of any of these things. There's a couple of factors here. One was unknown environment, and he was not kenneled. Two, the day of 4th of July, fireworks going off. Most dogs hate fireworks, and this instance, when I asked him, he hates fireworks, so he's under stress because of that. Three, someone, I can't remember if he had met them or not, entered the home while his family was gone. So those three things there, I'm going, yep, I would expect a dog bite to happen. Mainly the third factor of someone just entering the home, but the factor of being under stress because of the fireworks is also an added variable. So when I spoke to them, I was like, look, your dog did his job. Like, everybody was gone. He was by himself, unknown environment. Because his baseline instinct is survive and replicate if he's not been neutered. And in that moment, someone entered that he didn't recognize or didn't trust or saw as out of the ordinary. And it's like, hey, I don't know if they're trying to harm me or not, but I better get in the first bite. Otherwise, I'm a dead dog, okay? Or just the fact of like, mom and dad aren't here, I need to take care of the home. So that bite was, in my book, a valid bite. And I told them, had it been a burglar that had tried to break into their home to steal something and he had bit them, it would be a totally different conversation. But the fact that it was a friend is what made it unacceptable. But he was not aware of this, okay? And even if he was aware or like recognized, oh, I've seen you a handful of times, it was still out of the norm of when I see you, my family's usually around. The way I put this to people is, we have friends come over, and when we invite them, it's not strange. Like it was planned. Like I plan on seeing my friend, they're gonna come at 6. If they come at 5:45, no big deal, they're a little bit early, like I'm aware of this. But like, let's say you woke up in your home at like 1:30 in the morning to find your friend in the middle of your house. Right away, that whole the psychology or the mindset of like would be like, what are you doing inside of my home? Regardless of how well you know that person, them being in your home at 1:30 a.m. without your knowledge or consent is completely just not right. That's the dog mindset, except they don't think anything outside of like the awareness of knowing who that person was and knowing that there was an arrangement made for them to come over and drop something off with the owners. Like the dog doesn't know that. The dog just goes, I'm by myself, someone entered the home, it's me or them. So I was a case of territorial aggression, that they were afraid that the dog was going to become aggressive towards their baby, and I was like, nope, this was a completely, like it's a kind of isolated incident and completely valid. And not only that, but there's the added stressors of being in a foreign environment, not being provided a safe place, and then also the fireworks. Coincidentally, they had mentioned that typically on 4th of July, their dog is very anxious when they come home, from like family things and all that stuff, and he was really calm. And I told him it's most likely because he released all that stress and anxiety through the dog bites. And the person came in, and that's why like he was able to just get that stress out, and that's why he seemed more relaxed. In another example that I have was from a client, and I trained her dog, and her dog was territorial and like wouldn't let people come in, and we worked with a lot of stuff. The dog was doing really good, making friends and everything. We were talking about, because I think she was going to have like a dog walker, she's thinking about having a dog walker come, and I was like, well, you have to look at it this way. He may be fine with people coming into the home when you're around because I've taught you how to do that correctly. But if you're not home and someone enters the home and he goes crazy, well, technically that's valid, And yes, there are dogs that don't go crazy when people come over because they just don't have that heightened sense of territorial behavior, which is fine, but that's not all dogs. When I was talking to her, she's like, you know what? She's like, that's correct, because she had a friend she had met her dog several times, and the dog was always friendly and happy-go-lucky with her, never had any issues. So when her friend had to travel, she had asked her, would you do me a favor and watch my dog and walk him for me? I'm only going to be gone for a day or two. And she agreed to, and they're like, yeah, no problem, because the dog had already met her several times. but the dog never had experienced her entering the home when the owner wasn't around. So what happened was the dog was kenneled, thankfully, and when she came into the home and she went to let the dog actually went to attack her. And she went into self-defense mode and had to, like, be physical and kick the dog away and stuff until the dog ran into the kennel and she locked him up. But this was a dog that was completely friendly with her every single time she had met the dog when he was with his owner. And then they didn't do any kind of test or anything because they weren't expecting this, like a lot of people wouldn't. And right away go, yeah, like that's what I would expect, because it's a completely different context. It's you enter the home and mom is gone, and the dog's like, hey, this is out the ordinary. Yeah, I've seen you before, but you shouldn't be in my home when my mom's not around. And then so he became defensive. And she understood that, and she was like, yeah, I didn't take it personally. She's like, I figured it was something territorial, but she couldn't care for the dog because of that issue. When we talk about territorial behavior, I think the most common experience is someone knocks, the dog barks, and then when they see the owner open the door and the person comes in, because they love people and find people as non-threatening, is they go from who's at the door, and then when they see the person, they go, oh, I like people, and they loosen up, and they're just social because they're social dogs, and their sense of territorial behavior, there's no suspicion behind it, and they right away they just see it's a person, and they're just like, oh, I love people, right? But there's other personalities that are like in the middle, where they're kind of suspicious, but then once they realize, like, okay, nothing's going to happen, they open up and they're completely fine. And then we have other cases where they're more on the, I don't want to say extreme, but more so suspicious, and like, what, if I don't feel right about this, I'm gonna defend the home, defend myself, or defend the property, or my owners, whatever, using aggression, despite the fact that it might be a person's friend or something like that. So if you've ever experienced territorial behavior with your dog biting someone or something, there is what I deem like a spectrum of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, at least in the dog realm. And there's also the factors of, is the dog fearful, nervous, anxious? There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that come into play. So when I come in to evaluate things, I have to take everything into account and then kind of assess it and go like, okay, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense. If you experience territorial aggression or with your dog or anything like that, don't think there's something wrong with your dog. It's completely normal, should be addressed, because if it goes unaddressed, can certainly develop into a bigger problem. But, don't just think your dog has a screw loose because he's simply doing what's instinctual to them, which is protecting the home and protecting the property. So that was today's lesson in aggression with territorial aggression. And I'm Jesse with Canine Perspective. Thank you for watching.